For growers, you know, I guess y'all downloaded the budget for 16 and tried to figure out how we're going to make this thing cash flow. One thing that I can tell you from experience that we can save quite a bit of money on irrigation with computerized hole selection, whether it be PHAUCET or whether it be pipe planter. Tell you a little bit about how I got started. Back in 2008, I was at a crop management meeting in Little Rock, and Phil Tyker, which was our irrigation specialist at the time, said, "Steve, I'm in room so-and-so," said, "You get time, you need to come see me." I said, "What you got?" And he said, "I've got a program that you need to look at." I got around sometime that afternoon, and he showed me a program called PHAUCET. And it was a computerized hole selection program. He said, if you're taking 24 hours to get a set out, you'll do it in 14 or 15 hours. I said, "You're crazy." He said, "No, I'm serious." And we looked at it a little bit, and I said, I just don't believe it. He said, "Well, I'll challenge you." He said, 6 fields. If you'll do 6 fields, I'll come help you and see what you think about it. I said, "Okay." Because I just knew I had him. Planted a lot of corn in 2008. It got dry in May, so we got started pretty early. And Phil came down and he set up 6 fields as promised. And by the time I saw the 4th one get out, and I was looking at diesel prices right then, about $3.50 a gallon, and he was right. I was shutting those fields off at 2:30 in the morning that was supposed to be running till the next morning. And I said, you know, I got to do this on the whole farm. So I sent my key guys out and with a flow meter, and we got the flow on all of our wells. And we got a little rain in there that helped just a little bit, and I went out with a laser and I shot turn row elevations. And I was using a program at that time called FarmWorks, which Pipe Planter makes a lot of this easier. It takes care of the distance measuring. But I was using a program called FarmWorks, and I later found Planometer on an iPad. It worked even better to get my turn row length and my row length. And I started putting this stuff in the computer. And bottom line is, we did 4,500 acres, 155 fields, 450 sets in 1 year. We did it in 2 weeks, in fact. And I saved that year, the best we could tell, $100,000 to my bottom line. I paid a lot of taxes that year, and that was a good thing. But I still owe Phil Tyker for getting me on this program in 2008. And so we're going to go through and kind of talk a little bit about some numbers that we actually have proof of. A little background. We are one of 8 discovery farms, and we've been doing this for 4 years now. There's 4 that's poultry and beef, and then there's 4 row crop. We're down at Dumas in southeast corner. The only cotton discovery farm, and that's the 4 fields on the right. They call them DUM 1, 2, 3, and 4. DUM actually stands for Dumas, and you can see our field name a little bit better. Only one of those fields is got kind of a regular shape. Most, as you can see, a lot of our fields are kind of irregular shape, which really set us up for computerized hole selection. We are, as I said, a cotton and corn discoverer. We row crop 1 cornfield among those 4 fields. In the cotton, we're 4,500 acres, diverse, more soybeans than anything. A lot of buckshot ground, and that's another place that it really helped us. Is a lot of these clay soils we were pumping way too long on a set, and by doing it myself, I set up the stuff in the office. And I decreased those 48-hour sets to no more than 18 hours, which is what the university was telling us was kind of the maximum. My guys just couldn't do it, and the reason they couldn't figure out how to punch holes or make any changes. Even though they were doing a bad job, they was comfortable with what they were doing with the holes. But we are furrow irrigated on all but about 150 acres, and it's all under computerized hole selection for delivery design. We're conservation tillage as much as we can. We try to bed in the fall anytime we have the opportunity. I do not apply any fertilizer until after stand establishment. And that one came kind of by accident. Bill Robertson, our cotton specialist at the time, was doing a potash study. And I know you've all heard, you put out potash this year for next year's crop. And it was a rate study, but he also had a timing study, and one of them was 10 days before bloom. Although it wasn't statistically different, it was numerically better to apply 10 days before bloom. My assumption, if it works on potash, it works on all the other fertilizers. And liquid nitrogen, 32% urea is injected P&K broadcast. We're in the Mississippi River Basin Initiative. We have EQIP contracts and also Conservation Steward Program. And if any of you are not in Conservation Steward, that just about takes the place of the direct payments that we're no longer getting. That is something you really need to look into if you're not involved in it. On Discovery Farm, we work with pipe planters, soil moisture sensors, and surge valves, and we've learned from particularly soil moisture sensors and surge valves on the Discovery. Of course, as I said, as far as polypipe, we use computerized hole on the whole farm. What is computerized hole selection? It determines the size of the holes to punch in polytubing. I'll tell you a quick little story. When I first did this, I had a couple of my guys that had been with me forever. One in 1966, I mean, I really, it was like hitting him in the face with a baseball bat. He came up to him, "What are you doing?" Told me, "I don't know how to do this. I've been doing this 30-something years." And I just looked at him and I said, "No, I just think we can do it better." And whole shop was mad at me for about 2 weeks, and because we just turned their world upside down. My rice man was concerned. He had never done row crop irrigation. He had only worked rice, and we had implemented side inlet irrigation about 3 years prior to that. Finally, he walked up to the guy that was giving me the most trouble, and he said, because I don't want to call any names, he said, "You know, the boss hands me a piece of paper. He tells me how many of what size holes to punch, what size pipe to lay. He drops flags down where my sets start and stop, and he tells me how fast to run the well. They all get out about the same time, and I ain't blowed none up yet. Now, what's your problem?" 15 seconds from this guy changed the whole atmosphere in my shop forever. The next thing I know, my guys were saying, "You know, this field's kind of droughty. We need to go to every middle instead of every other. Can you set this up for me?" And it was just phenomenal at the back and forth between my crew and how much better we got along, because I was no longer hounding them about how much water they were wasting. Because what was happening when we first started using polypipe, it wasn't very good. And when we set up a set, 2/3 of it would be out and 1/3 was halfway up in the field because they were afraid they were going to blow it up. I took full control with the computerized program. It's got a lot of engineering math in it, and it works. It just works, and it just totally changed the way, you know, we get a new field or a new farm, setting up water on it's just like getting in your truck and going to lunch. It's just about how much effort it takes to do it. Of course, it calculates the pressure along the polytubing. It allows us, sometimes we have to put 100, sometimes 300 feet of transfer pipe. When we start going out, we've got some sets, we go out 1,800 feet from the well. And when you start going that distance, your set number 3, your supply pipe has to be bigger, and sometimes you have to have a little bit of supply. We get it right there, and we don't blow it up and have to go fix a problem. We've got it fixed when we lay it. different row lengths. It solves those problems. It just gives you even distribution, and we've got some examples that we'll show you here in a little bit on that. Reduce our water and nutrient runoff, and I'll show you some actual numbers on that we take simply because we have 4 fields that's monitored in Discovery. 25%, we're trying to be conservative. On my farm, if a grower is got a notepad or spiral and every year he's trying to do a little bit better, okay, I need to reduce this, so many of these hole sizes, and he's been doing this for years, 25% is probably right. It was more like 40% up to 60 on some of my fields. It just makes life easier. We know what we're doing when we start, and times like if you've got a lot of down elevation, even with a high flow well, you may run 12-inch pipe. That gives you some friction where it's not as hard, where the water doesn't all go to the other end. And on the other side of the coin, if it's level or maybe a little rise, you maybe have to go to 15, and you know that before you lay it. And it just builds confidence with the crew that's laying pipe. They know what they're supposed to do. I write on the flags, in the first set, transfer pipe to here, 15-inch pipe, or just whatever. Give them little clues how to lay this stuff. Commitment in savings. I began in 2008, and I told you what a skeptic I was. I was proven wrong. It's real easy to say, "Oh, that won't work," but it does work. I can tell you, we've been doing it since 2008. The entire farm is on computerized hole selection. I think on the right-hand side is a real good description. If you're not on it, you're just blowing dollars right out the pump. 24-hour sets, 14 to 15 hours. Irregular set, irregular shapes is no problem. It eliminates the guesswork. Confidence in the crew. We all know what we're doing. We don't have any problems. The $100,000 fuel's down a little bit this year. That may be $30,000 saving. It may be 40. I'll take $30,000 any day of the week. And fuel most likely will go up in the future, and we're already, if you're on it, you're set, you're ready to go. Phil calculated in 2008 we saved 670 million gallons of water on our farm, just our farm. Can you imagine the whole Mid-South, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, Missouri, how many gallons of water? We're losing 10 inches of water table a year in my area. That's got to stop. I'm getting older. We're looking at the next generation. That generation's going to run out of water. My grandchild doesn't stand a chance. My daddy told me when I was about 25 that we need to leave the farm in better shape than when I found it. If I use all the water up, if my generation uses all the water and I don't leave those resources for the next generations, what have I done? But quite frankly, like now, the most important thing is staying in business through 2016. That's reason enough to change it, regardless of what we may do for the future. We saved 5.6 inches of water in 2008 on the entire farm. What is computerized hole selection? It determines the size of holes to punch in the polytubing and how many. Another example, a crew came to me on a couple of cases and they said, we need more water. We'd already gone to inch holes, couldn't get it out to end. Set me up with 2 1-inch holes. Narrow sets, but guess what? We pushed that water out in 12 hours on those sets that you could pump 3 days and not hit the bottom of the field. It's just a matter, once they learned, it's easy. Just tell the boss, I need this. It's not any problem to go set it up. Whatever the situation, you're able to control it. And we do calculate the pressure. Let's see, I believe I went the wrong way on that. Nutrient runoff and waste of water. And this is not one of my fields. I'm not sure where this slide came from, but there's a lot of points on here. Unknown well and riser flow rates. We had no clue what our wells were doing. And a flow meter is $1,500, $2,000. How much do you spend on other equipment in a year? I mean, it's nothing. And what we found too is wells that maybe were doing 1,000 gallons a minute, that we really had been struggling trying to get water across, and we really needed to spend that $20,000 and fix that well. By using computerized hole selection, we got by with some of those wells for several years, and we were no longer getting behind. So there's a lot of reasons why we might want to use it. Large sets, long watering times. Not only myself, the Felton brothers at Mariana said, you know, let's see, what was it, 3 years ago, I think they paid Chris $6 an acre to do a 6,500 acre farm. And I only watered 3 times that year, and they still said, you know, that's the best thing we ever did. Those 48 hours that we were pumping on bean sets, we were getting in 18 hours. And they made more beans that year because they weren't keeping the ground saturated for such long periods of time. We've seen it in our fields as well. Same deal, cotton. If you sit there and pump and pump and pump, the water gets saturated and the roots lose their oxygen, and that's another reason that we need to try to get it done and get it out. The tailwater can be a problem. I can show you an example of that here shortly. Nutrient runoff. Right now, the retailers, the industry, the do-gooders, tree huggers, they are all over us about the epoxy in the Gulf of Mexico. What we're putting in the Mississippi River that is causing all the problems. I will show you in a minute the same thing, and I showed this earlier to some retailers of how little nutrients, P and N, that we're running off the field. But this is an important deal now. This is kind of what was happening to me before we started, and I think the case may even be worse than what this is showing. But I think a lot of you probably can relate to this scenario where the water begins, and it takes several hours to finish getting it out. And then we go to that irregular field. I know at home I see a lot of growers, they only have 2 hole sizes in their pickup truck. We have 13, but we try not to use over 6 or 7. This is what we're trying to avoid. Well, Chris, I was hoping you put it in where it showed even distribution.
I'm going to get to that.
You'll get to that one on yours?
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
All right. As being a discovery farm, you can see we got some pretty fancy equipment there. I think each one of these stations is about $30,000. And it measures the water flow that's leaving the field. On the right, we have meters on that's stationary for the entire crop, and we get the numbers before and after each irrigation, so we know how many gallons that we pump. And in the middle is Mike Daniels. He looks after our discovery farm, does a fantastic job. And we pushed him for numbers. Some of the numbers he was giving us in the wintertime, we asked for him in 3 days so that we could learn what effective irrigation was. Bill taught us that year before last. On the left is where they're constructing the flumes. The center one is behind a big rain, and you can see how much soil matter and nutrients and all is running out of the field. On your right is a normal irrigation runoff. That's at its peak. And you can see the water is clear. We don't have soil particles, and I can show you a little bit down the road here our nutrient runoff from this. It's phenomenal how low it is. But the one on the right is what we're trying to do with an irrigation event. 2015, we've got some numbers here. We're 85% efficient on the well cotton, 91% on shop, and we had one event on the shop that kind of stood out. We put 2.67 inches of water on the field. There were 16,000 gallons ran off the field. That's on a 24-acre field, so that's 700-800 gallons an acre. 76 to 77,000 gallons makes an acre inch. I think our efficiency was somewhere around 94-95% on that irrigation. The East Weaver at 75 is not entirely true. It wasn't really that bad. We found it toward the end of the season. We had a riser that had a air vent with a metal air vent on it that had rusted out, and we had water that was flowing out of that air vent and running back into the ditch that was also running out of the outlet on the East Weaver. So that number wasn't quite that bad, and then the home place at 81. So we're from 80 to 90% efficient using computerized hole selection. I dare say in my area it's probably 40 to 50 would be the average. I know growers that let it run for 3 days after it gets out, which that number would be even lower. But I would say, I know we had fields before we started that our efficiency would be more like 40 to 50%. As I promised you earlier, nutrient runoff on total nitrates, the worst one we've got is 1/10 of applied. 1/10 of 1 pound per acre of total nitrate. When you go back to the nitrogen itself, 0.34 is the high, down to 0.16. That's in pounds per acre that we lost in nitrogen under this system. If we go to P, we're looking at 0.0 something for soluble. And when we go to total, 0.1 is our high. 0.1 pound per acre of total applied loss in P under this system. And going back to some individual events, there was times that maybe we weren't soaking up on the field. The shock cotton was one in particular that we've done in the past. We'd run an extra 12 hours to see if we could make that moisture sensor pick up moisture. Our nutrients went up big time when we ran that extra 12 hours. So that is a consideration from your pocketbook, as well as right now EPA has seen these numbers. A lot of the retailers at Walmart's, Targets, JCPenney, a lot of those people that are pushing us, saying that we're bad for the environment and all. We don't want regulation. That's another reason why we need to implement this program. If we don't, we're going to be regulated. Somebody's going to tell us how much water we can use, and we don't want to go there either. So I just highly recommend that we implement this program as fully as possible. And saw some numbers. If 80% of the producers was on computerized hole selection, the water table decline would stop. And I think this is a very important goal to go to. And with that, I'll open it for questions. No questions, Chris?